I had settled into what I thought would be a quiet Friday evening. My desk lamp cast a warm circle of light over the spreadsheets I'd been reviewing, numbers dancing across the screen in neat little rows. Outside my apartment window, the Seattle skyline shimmered, the autumn air cool and crisp, and I held a cup of chamomile tea close for comfort. My mind was fully occupied with projections and invoices when my phone buzzed. At first, I ignored it. I assumed it was a reminder from my calendar or a late message from a client. But when the vibration persisted, I glanced at the screen. The text was from my brother, Quillan. I swiped it open and my heart skipped. Borrowed that cheap bracelet for my date tonight. I froze. My first instinct was disbelief. Cheap bracelet? I blinked twice, convinced I'd misread the words. I reread the message slowly, each syllable cutting deeper. He hadn't asked, he'd simply taken, and he thought it was cheap. A low laugh escaped me, though it was hollow, bitter. Cheap? Nothing I own is cheap, I muttered to myself. For years, Quillan had dismissed my work, as though the pieces I designed were mere trinkets. It wasn't about money, it was about respect. And once again, he'd found a way to minimize me. I set my teacup down harder than I intended, liquid splashing onto the table. That text wasn't just careless, it was a reminder of every time he had brushed me off, every moment my family had chosen to believe I was less. I leaned back in my chair, phone still glowing in my hand. Family should know you best, but sometimes they know you the least. My brother had never asked how I managed to live in a downtown loft, how I ran my own studio. He never cared to understand the hours I put in, the years of sacrifice. I remembered dinners when my parents would shower him with praise for the most mundane achievements, while my milestones were met with silence or a distracted nod. It wasn't hatred, I didn't hate him, but the imbalance had carved something sharp in me, a quiet resentment that never dulled. And here it was again, playing out in 6 words and a smug emoji. To him, I was still the little sister with nothing worth guarding. To me, this text was a neon sign flashing the truth I'd tried to ignore. Quillan assumed my things, like my place in the family, held no real value. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the irritation rise into something heavier, a sadness that had been sitting inside me for years. I pushed away from my desk and strode quickly to the bedroom. The hardwood floor chilled my bare feet, the silence around me suddenly oppressive. In the corner sat the jewelry box that held not just my work, but my memories. The dark wood gleamed faintly under the light as I lifted the lid. Inside were pieces I wore every day, the pearl earrings my mother gave me when I graduated, the vintage bracelet from my grandmother, a simple gold chain I often used for business meetings. All there. My eyes darted to the velvet compartment in the back, the one only I ever opened. My breath caught. The compartment was empty. A wave of cold swept through me. My hands trembled as I touched the spot where the sapphire bracelet had lain, its absence more jarring than I could bear. My pulse hammered in my ears. He didn't just take any bracelet. My whisper broke the silence. He took the one piece I could never risk. The room tilted for a moment as the reality sank in. I pressed my palm against the desk for balance, every muscle taut with panic and fury. I paced the room, trying to steady my thoughts. Quillan hadn't just borrowed something, he had crossed a line I had drawn long ago. That bracelet wasn't an accessory to toss on for a casual date. It was part of my professional collection, cataloged, insured, protected. And he had used the spare key, the one I had given him for emergencies, not for sneaking in, not for rifling through my personal belongings. He had betrayed not only my trust, but also the boundaries I had fought hard to maintain. Trust is built in drops and lost in buckets, I murmured, recalling a phrase I'd once heard. Tonight, he had emptied the bucket entirely. I sat on the edge of my bed, my fingers tightening around the phone. A dozen thoughts collided in my head. Should I call him now? Should I drive across town and demand it back? Should I let him face the consequences of his ignorance? But instead of panicking, I began piecing the facts together. The bracelet's value, the potential fallout, the pattern of disrespect. If I let this pass, I would confirm every assumption he had ever made about me. That I was harmless, silent, invisible. I walked back to my desk and stared at the city beyond the glass. The skyline was calm, but inside me, a storm was rising. I whispered into the quiet, "Cheap? He has no idea." The irony cut deep. My brother thought he'd borrowed a trinket to impress a woman. The truth, he had walked out with something priceless, a piece that could alter reputations, careers, even futures. I leaned against the desk, my mind racing. He saw me as small. He saw my work as meaningless. But this theft, this insult, had lit a fuse that had been waiting years to ignite. I turned the phone in my hands, staring again at the smug emoji he had sent. That single, grinning face now felt like a spark to dry tinder. My eyes flicked toward my laptop. The insurance file sat waiting for me to confirm what I already knew. The number would be staggering. And Quillen had no clue what he'd just stepped into. I picked up the teacup again, the liquid now cold, and whispered to myself, that careless text wasn't just annoying. It might have just detonated a time bomb in my family. The glow of my phone still lingered in my mind as I lowered myself into the chair at my desk. I opened my laptop, fingers trembling over the keyboard, each keystroke hesitant. I wasn't searching the web for distraction this time. I was digging into my insurance records, the files that cataloged my professional collection. My heart raced as I whispered to myself, if I'm right about what he took, this isn't just careless, it's catastrophic. The screen filled with folders, all labeled meticulously. Years of work, every piece documented with value estimates, serial numbers, and photographs. My hands shook as I navigated to the section marked Private Collection. I scrolled quickly but carefully, as though rushing would make me miss the truth. Numbers blurred, dates danced in front of me, but I pushed forward, steadying my breath, telling myself that logic would calm the panic rising in my chest. Finally, my eyes landed on it. The sapphire bracelet, its description clear as day, the photographs crisp, the appraisal sealed in digital ink. I read the line aloud, though the words nearly caught in my throat. Estimated value, $2.3 million. I sat back, the air knocked out of me. It wasn't about the money alone, although the figure was staggering. It was about what it meant. My brother had walked out of my home with a piece worth more than most people's houses, and he had reduced it to cheap. The insult wasn't just familial, it was professional. That bracelet represented months of design, collaboration with jewelers, negotiations with insurers. And to Quillen, it was nothing more than a shiny trinket to hand off for a dinner date. Some people know the price of everything and the value of nothing, I muttered, recalling an old saying. Tonight, Quillen had proven he wasn't just ignorant, he was reckless. The realization hit me like a blow. He didn't know he had borrowed a fortune. He thought he had borrowed a toy. I shut the laptop halfway, staring into the dim light of my apartment. How did he even get it? I walked to the front door, my hand brushing the key rack. A sharp memory surfaced. The spare key. I had given him that key years ago, only for emergencies. A lost phone. A forgotten wallet. Maybe, in the rarest of cases, if I was locked out. Never for something like this. Never for sneaking in to paw through my things. My stomach tightened as the truth settled. Quillen hadn't just borrowed jewelry. He had violated my home. I spoke aloud, though no one was there to hear. He didn't just take my bracelet. He invaded my space, my trust, my dignity. It felt dirty, as though I'd been watched in my own apartment. The betrayal layered itself over years of minimized slights. He hadn't just crossed a line, he'd obliterated it. For anyone else, the metaphor would be like someone reading their diary or charging their credit card without asking. For me, it was worse. This wasn't just my property, it was my work, my name, my future. I sat down again, forcing myself to breathe evenly. I couldn't afford hysteria, not tonight. This isn't just sibling drama, I told myself firmly. This is theft. I pressed my palms flat on the desk, grounding myself in the reality of the moment. The boundaries I had drawn were not vague, they were crystal clear. He had used the key I trusted him with. He had ignored the unspoken rule that my work, my collection, was sacred. I recalled something I once read. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors. And he just kicked mine open. That was exactly how it felt. A calmer resolve began to spread through me, hardening like steel. I knew then I couldn't just let this slip by, the way I had so many times before. I wasn't the little sister who shrugged it off anymore. If I let this go, he'd keep assuming my silence was agreement. I stood, walking back toward the window. The city lights outside glowed faintly, cars passing on the streets below, lives carrying on unaware of the storm brewing in mine. The silence in the apartment pressed in, heavy but clarifying. "He has no idea what he's done," I whispered, my voice steady now. The sapphire bracelet wasn't just valuable, it was irreplaceable. Quillon thought he had taken a trinket for a date. In truth, he had taken something that carried weight far beyond his comprehension. I traced the glass of the window with my fingertips, considering what came next. Should I call him? Should I drive across town and demand it back? Or should I let the law speak for me, cold and indisputable? The thought of dragging family into police reports twisted in my gut, but so did the idea of once again being dismissed, unheard, unseen. The choice wasn't between peace and conflict, it was between silence and truth. I closed my eyes, letting the decision simmer, and opened them again with clarity. I wasn't just dealing with a careless brother, I said into the night air. I was staring at a betrayal worth $2.3 million. The apartment was quiet, except for the faint hum of my laptop, its glow still pooling across the desk. I hadn't moved since reading the valuation, but the silence pressed harder now, as if the walls themselves knew what Quillon had done. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered the words I once read from Maya Angelou. "When people show you who they are, believe them the first time." It wasn't the first time Quillon minimized me, not by a long shot. But tonight was different. Tonight wasn't a sarcastic comment or a dismissive shrug. Tonight, he'd broken into my sanctuary, taken what was mine, and mocked me while doing it. The betrayal wasn't isolated. It was the echo of years where my voice carried no weight, years when my efforts seemed invisible to the very people who should have seen me most clearly. I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the years unspool behind my lids. His text wasn't just a theft of property, it was a reminder of every time I had been overlooked, diminished, erased. I was 12 again. The kitchen smelled of birthday cake, frosting heavy with sugar, the air warm with family chatter. I had spent weeks stringing together beads and small stones, polishing each piece by hand until the bracelet gleamed as best as a child's work could. It wasn't perfect, but to me, it was love made visible. I presented it to my mother, cheeks burning with excitement. She opened the small box, held the bracelet up, and before she could even speak, Quillon's laugh rang out. "Looks like something from a dollar store," he snorted. My father chuckled under his breath. My mother smiled awkwardly and said, "It's sweet, but it's not real jewelry, darling." The words sliced deeper than they realized. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I was shattered. That night, I promised myself I'd grow into someone who made pieces no one could call cheap. Sitting now in my dim apartment, I realized Quillon's careless text wasn't new. It was the same insult reborn, the same laughter replaying after decades. My brother hadn't changed. Maybe none of them had. I thought about last Thanksgiving, sitting at the table with wine glasses full and conversation bouncing around. Quillon had just landed a new position in pharmaceutical sales, nothing remarkable, but my parents beamed at him as though he'd discovered electricity. "You've really made us proud, son," my father said, lifting his glass. I had been quiet until my mother glanced at me. "And how's your little business going, Zephira? You're still making necklaces?" I remember staring at her, the sting sharp even then. I had just closed a deal to showcase in a luxury gallery in Los Angeles. My collection had been featured in a magazine, but to them, it was still just making necklaces. Parents don't mean to compare, but they always do. Sitting there, I had felt myself shrink, my success folded neatly away behind Quillon's small triumphs. Tonight, with the bracelet gone, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about jewelry. This was about validation I had never been given. He hadn't stolen a piece of gold and sapphire. He had stolen the acknowledgement that should have been mine long ago. I rose from the chair and walked the length of my apartment, each step steadying my resolve. I wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't going to swallow this insult like I had all the others. Being the youngest meant being underestimated, I said to myself. But underestimation is a kind of fuel. I stopped at the mirror, staring at my reflection. The woman who looked back at me wasn't the invisible girl at the kitchen table. I had built a company. I had built a name. And now I had to protect it. My family would try to smooth it over. They always did. They would say he didn't mean harm, that it was just a mistake, that I shouldn't cause waves. But this wasn't going to be downplayed, not anymore. This time, I would not stay silent. I closed the laptop, the screen snapping shut like the closing of a case file. The city outside flickered in lights, cars moving in streams that looked almost serene. Inside, I sat in absolute stillness, rehearsing the confrontation I knew was coming. I pictured my parents' faces, their familiar pleas for me to be the bigger person. I pictured Quillon shrugging, rolling his eyes, making jokes to lighten the weight of what he'd done. No, not this time. I practiced the words I would say. I reminded myself of the facts, of the evidence. He had used the emergency key. He had entered without permission. He had stolen from me. And I had the records to prove it. The storm was already on its way. I could feel it pressing at the edges of tomorrow. Tomorrow, when I confronted him, I knew I wouldn't just be fighting my brother. I would be fighting years of silence. The morning light was just breaking through my blinds when my phone vibrated on the nightstand. I reached for it, half expecting another client reminder. Instead, the message came from Marceline, my oldest friend, the one person outside of work who always noticed the details. Z, she wrote, I'm not trying to stir drama, but I swear I just saw your bracelet in a clip online. Some girl was flashing it around like it was hers. I sat up quickly, heart pounding. My first instinct was to deny it. Maybe it was a replica, or maybe Marceline's eyes had played tricks. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. I dialed her immediately. Where did you see it? A live stream, she said. Looked like Quillon's girlfriend. She kept tilting her wrist to the camera, bragging about the piece her boyfriend gave her. And Z, it looked exactly like yours. Her voice was hesitant, gentle, but it hit me like a hammer. My brother hadn't just taken the bracelet. He was flaunting it, handing my work to a woman who didn't even know its worth. I whispered, Of course he did. The dread was real now, but so was the anger. If confirmation from my own eyes wasn't enough, having someone outside the family recognize it for what it was, sealed it. Quillon wasn't being careless, he was being reckless. He thought the rules, the trust, the boundaries didn't apply to him. I told Marceline, Thank you, I'll handle it. She sighed softly. Z, don't let him twist this back on you like he always does. Her words built the urgency inside me. He was daring me, and I had to respond. By late morning, I was behind the wheel, steering through the quieter streets of downtown Seattle. The city looked deceptively calm, coffee shops opening, joggers on sidewalks, couples with dogs enjoying their Saturday. Inside my car, however, I rehearsed every word I planned to say. Trust once broken never fits the same. That phrase circled in my mind like a drumbeat. My brother had broken more than trust, he had spit on it. The closer I drove toward his building, the clearer my resolve became. I wasn't arriving as the little sister he could dismiss. I was arriving as the rightful owner of what he stole. Parking the car, I drew in a deep breath, letting the anger sharpen into focus rather than chaos. If this was going to explode, I wanted it to explode with precision. When Quillon opened his apartment door, he wore a grin as though nothing was out of place. Well, if it isn't my baby sister, what's with the early visit? I brushed past him, stepping inside. Where's the bracelet? He chuckled, as if my tone was amusing rather than alarming. Relax, it's just a cheap bracelet. Why are you making it a big deal? His words landed like old wounds tearing open. Cheap. Always cheap. No matter what I built, no matter what I achieved, he found a way to diminish it. It's not cheap, I snapped. And you know you didn't have permission to take it. You used the emergency key, Quillon. That was never meant for this. He leaned against the counter, arms folded, still smirking. You're overreacting, like always. No one cares about your little trinkets except you. My chest tightened, but I stood taller. You walked into my home without asking. You took something insured for millions and handed it off like it was a party favor. This isn't me overreacting. This is theft. He shrugged. It's just family. Don't be dramatic. You always want to make yourself the victim. My hands clenched at my sides. This wasn't sibling banter anymore. This was war. The air between us thickened, sharp with years of unsaid truths. He narrowed his eyes, ready to twist the knife. You've always been controlling, Z. Mom and Dad say it too. You're too sensitive. You can't just let things go. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. Too sensitive. You've never once asked me about my work. Not once in all these years. Do you even know what I do day to day? Do you care that I've built a business from scratch? That I've kept our grandfather's name alive in a way you never could? He scoffed, but his posture shifted. You think you're better than me because you play with gemstones? I snapped back. Better than you? No. More responsible? Absolutely. You're 35 years old, Quillan, and you still act like a spoiled teenager. Meanwhile, I've been carrying the weight of a legacy you can't even spell. His smirk faltered, but only for a moment. The heat in his eyes matched mine. The fight wasn't about jewelry anymore. It was about years of invisibility, years of being unseen while he basked in attention he never earned. Finally, he broke the stare with a dismissive laugh. You'll get it back when I feel like it. For now, it's mine. I froze. The audacity wasn't new, but the boldness of saying it to my face, with such arrogance, stripped away any last thread of hesitation. He wasn't just ignoring my warning, he was daring me. I stepped back toward the door, voice steady. You have no idea what you've started. And as I walked out of his apartment, I knew this wouldn't end with words. I tried to busy myself at home that evening, but nothing could still the restless hum inside me. I pulled laundry from the dryer, flipped through a book I wasn't reading, stood over the stove reheating leftovers I had no appetite for. Every small action felt hollow. My mind circled back to the bracelet, to Quillan's smug dismissal, to the sound of his voice when he said it was his now. Finally, I dropped onto the couch and unlocked my phone. If I couldn't quiet my thoughts, maybe I could at least distract them with the endless scroll of social media. I typed his name into the search bar. Nothing. Then I searched hers, Roxalana, a name that always sounded like performance, as though she were auditioning for a part she didn't quite earn. Her account popped up, public, glowing with carefully angled photos and captions written for attention. And then, at the very top, a red circle. Live. I tapped it. The feed opened to the glimmer of candlelight on polished glass, the soft clink of silverware, laughter drifting from surrounding tables. She was at a restaurant, the kind where reservations were hard to get, and the check could feed a family of 4 for a week. My dread climbed with each second until the camera tilted down. There it was, circling her wrist, catching the light like a trapped star. My bracelet. I leaned forward, phone inches from my face. Roxalana's voice bubbled with delight. He surprised me with this gorgeous bracelet tonight, she said, thrusting her arm into the camera's view. The comments exploded across the screen. Wow, he must be loaded. Girl, marry him. What a man. Treats his woman right. My stomach turned. They weren't seeing Quillan's arrogance or her vanity. They were seeing generosity, love, wealth. They were seeing the image he wanted them to see, built with something that wasn't his to give. Some folks will steal your work and call it a favor, I muttered, remembering a phrase one of my professors had used years ago when we discussed intellectual property theft. Back then, it was theory. Tonight, it was my life. The humiliation cut deeper with every praise heaped on them. These strangers were admiring a piece that carried my signature, my sweat, my reputation, stripped clean of context and reduced to a trinket in her hands. Roxalana giggled, leaning toward the camera. He said he wanted me to have something that looks expensive because I deserve the best. My chest tightened, fists curling against my knees. That bracelet wasn't about her deserving anything. It was about years of design, about my company's standing, about everything I had worked for. Hearing her laugh, hearing her recite his words as though they were romantic rather than ignorant, was almost worse than the theft itself. The comments only piled on. You really are the perfect couple. Cheap. That thing looks like it could pay my rent for 10 years. She's glowing. Must be true love. Anger bled into sorrow. My own family had devalued me, and now outsiders were profiting off the same narrative. Quillan hadn't just stolen from me. He had stolen credit, stolen dignity, stolen the very essence of the recognition I deserved. I blinked hard, refusing the tears that threatened. He wasn't going to break me down into silence this time. I steadied myself, tapped the record button on my phone, and captured the stream as it played. Every frame was evidence, every smug grin, every careless boast. I whispered into the empty room, "If they want a show, I'll give them one." Sometimes the only way to end a lie is to drag it into the light, and this lie was already blazing across the internet, amplified by comments, likes, and shares. The only question left was how far I was willing to take it. I sat straighter, replayed the clip, paused where she flashed the bracelet, saved the screenshot, then another and another. My phone became a vault of proof, a record of betrayal too large to be ignored. This wasn't going to be chalked up to sibling rivalry. It wasn't going to be brushed aside by my parents with gentle reminders to let it go. This was going to escalate, because now it had to. I scrolled through the comment section again, slower this time. Some users weren't convinced. "Looks fake, dude. No way that's real. She's bragging about costume jewelry." Others pushed back. "Don't be jealous. He obviously spent thousands." The irony was unbearable. The only person who knew the truth sat here in a dark apartment, watching strangers debate the authenticity of what was, in fact, one of the most valuable pieces I had ever designed. Quillan thought it was a date accessory. He thought it was cheap enough to hand off without thought. But tomorrow the world would know its real worth, and his real shame. By the time I set my phone down, the apartment was darker than I realized. The clock blinked close to midnight, but sleep was impossible. Notifications kept vibrating against the coffee table, dozens piling up faster than I could swipe them away. At first, I thought they were from friends checking in, but when I opened the screen, my stomach dropped. Screenshots, links, tags with my name attached. Strangers gossiping about my brother, and about me, though they didn't know it was me they were cutting into. I opened one message from a colleague. "Is this your design? It looks a lot like something you'd make." Another came from an old client. "Tell me this isn't real, please." And then the endless posts, people mocking Quillan for flaunting what they thought was fake, others defending Roxalana, calling her queen for showing off her new gift. My private piece, the bracelet I had poured months into, had become entertainment for an online audience. "Privacy is a luxury you lose the moment your life becomes someone else's entertainment," I whispered. I wasn't talking to anyone, but the words sounded truer in the dark. The comments kept rolling, faster than I could read. Each one felt like another nail driving in, proof that the thing I held sacred had become a joke for strangers to dissect. I scrolled further, my jaw tight. "Looks fake, dude. That thing is straight from a flea market. She's glowing, though. Love looks good on her. Queen energy, flaunting that bling." It was surreal. The conversation wasn't about me as the designer, the owner, the one who gave the piece its life. It was about them, their fake romance, their showmanship, their lies. I clenched my phone so tightly, my knuckles whitened. Betrayal wasn't enough of a word. It wasn't just Quillan stealing. It was the world laughing along, handing him the credit and me the ridicule. "They're laughing at him," I muttered, "but they're laughing through me, too." I pressed my forehead into my hand, forcing myself to breathe. I had been invisible in my family for years, brushed aside in favor of his small triumphs. Now that same invisibility had gone viral, amplified by strangers who thought they were in on the joke. I scrolled again. One comment caught my eye. "If that bracelet's real, it's not a boyfriend's gift. It's worth millions." For the first time that night, my heart jumped. I tapped the profile. It belonged to a well-known Seattle jeweler, someone whose words carried weight in the industry. His post was already spreading. "That piece looks exactly like a one-of-a-kind design valued in the millions," he wrote. "If it's authentic, it belongs in a vault, not on a dinner date." The words were like a spotlight cutting through fog. Relief and dread collided inside me. Finally, someone recognized my work, validated the truth. But that meant the scandal wasn't just speculation anymore. It was real, undeniable, and spiraling out of my control. I whispered, "The truth will out." My grandfather used to say that. He believed lies could only last so long before reality tore through. Now, the internet was tearing it open for me. My phone buzzed again with Marceline's call. I answered immediately. "Z, are you seeing this?" she asked, her voice tight. "Yes," I said, steady though my pulse was racing. "This is bigger than just him embarrassing you. This could hit your name, your business. You can't let him bury you in this mess." "I won't," I told her. "Not this time." When the call ended, I sat back, letting the weight of it sink in. The irony burned. For years, my family treated me like I was invisible. My accomplishments didn't make the dinner table conversation. My success was always second to Quillen's scraps of progress, and now the world was seeing me, but through the wrong lens. They weren't seeing the designer, the professional, the woman who carried her grandfather's legacy. They were seeing a scandal, a cheap joke, a shiny object held up by the wrong hands. Humiliation was the first wave, but under it came something stronger, determination. Gandhi's words echoed in my head, words I once read in a biography. First, they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. They had ignored me. They were laughing at me. Soon they would fight me, and after that, I would win. This wasn't about a sibling squabble anymore. It wasn't even about family pride. It was about my name, my craft, my dignity. And I was done letting anyone, Quillen, my parents, or strangers online, decide the value of my work. I spent the next hour saving everything. Screenshots of the live stream, the jeweler's post, the mocking comments, the praise Roxalana soaked in. My phone's storage filled with proof, each file a weapon waiting to be drawn. "They think they're writing my story," I whispered to myself, staring at the phone. "But tomorrow, I take the pen back." Outside my window, the city was quiet, but the online world roared like a storm I couldn't shut out. My apartment felt like a bunker, the walls closing in with every buzz of the phone, every reminder that this was no longer contained. I placed the phone on the table, sat up straight, and let the silence settle in my chest. I wasn't just a sister betrayed anymore. I was the rightful owner of something priceless, and it was time to act like it. By morning, I told myself, it wouldn't just be an argument. It would be a reckoning. Sunday afternoon, I parked my car in front of my parents' house, the same brick home that had held 1,000 family dinners and just as many unspoken slights. My hands tightened on the steering wheel before I finally shut off the engine. I could already imagine the dining room, the air heavy with expectation, Quillen smirking like he always did, mother wringing her hands, father leaning back with that defensive scowl. Families love to call it a discussion, but sometimes it feels more like an ambush. I opened the door and stepped into the living room, folder of documents under my arm. Every step toward the dining table felt like I was walking into a courtroom. Sibylla gestured nervously for me to sit, her eyes darting from me to Quillen, as if she were bracing for an explosion. Theron cleared his throat, his jaw tight. Quillen leaned back in his chair, arms folded, smug as ever. "Well," Quillen began, "I hope you're here to apologize for dragging all this nonsense online." I pulled out my chair and sat, spine straight, folder pressed against the table. "I'm not here to apologize." Quillen's smirk widened. "Of course you're not. You never are. You're exaggerating again, Z. It's just jewelry. You've got plenty of it. Why act like I robbed Fort Knox?" I let him finish before responding. "You walked into my apartment, Quillen. You used a key you weren't supposed to use. You took something insured for millions." He scoffed, glancing at our parents. "Listen to her. Millions, she says. She's trying to humiliate me, Mom. She's always been like this, dramatic, needing attention. Sibylla reached across the table toward me. Honey, maybe this isn't worth tearing the family apart. Quillan probably didn't realize. I cut her off, my voice calm but sharp. He knew. And this isn't about family anymore. It's about facts. Theron sighed. Zafira, must we escalate everything? Your brother didn't hurt anyone. Heat surged through me, the same déjà vu I'd felt countless times. Every childhood memory of being told not to make a fuss echoed around me. History repeats itself when no one learns the lesson, I said evenly, my gaze fixed on father. Quillan laughed under his breath. She's quoting slogans now. What's next? Are you going to sue me? I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, pulling out the neat stack of papers, insurance certificates, ownership documents, appraisals with bold figures. I laid them across the table like cards in a poker game. This isn't an opinion. This is documented fact. Silence pressed into the room. Sibylla's mouth opened slightly, her eyes scanning the numbers. Theron leaned forward, frowning as though the paper itself was lying. Quillan's smirk wavered. $2.3 million, I said, my tone steady. That's the value of what you call cheap. That's what you thought you could hand off at dinner like a party favor. Mother's hand went to her chest. My God! Father looked at Quillan, his expression shifting from disbelief to restrained fury. Is this true? Quillan barked out a laugh, though it sounded thinner now. It's a scam. Paperwork can say anything. She's inflating numbers, trying to make herself look important. I leaned forward slightly. Important. This is my work, my livelihood, my company's reputation. You didn't just steal from me, Quillan. You endangered everything I built. The tension in the room slowed, thick as honey. For the first time, I felt vindicated. They couldn't brush this aside with platitudes. And then Quillan exploded. He shoved back his chair, face red, hands slamming the table. You're just the youngest. You've never built anything. Everything you have, you inherited. You ride on luck, not talent. His words sliced through me, raw and familiar. He'd said them before in smaller ways, but never with such venom. Mother gasped. Father's brow furrowed deeper, but neither of them rebuked him. I steadied myself, forcing my voice to remain calm. Sometimes truth doesn't need to be uncovered. It screams out of a person when you finally stop covering for them. And today, you just proved me right. Quillan pointed at me, trembling with rage. You think you're better than me? You think you can embarrass me in front of everyone. But you're nothing. You've always been nothing. My fists tightened under the table. Anger simmered, but clarity burned brighter. This wasn't about the bracelet anymore. This was about every dinner where he was praised while I was invisible. This was about every sacrifice I made that no one bothered to ask about. I turned to my parents. You hear him? This is who he is. Entitled, careless, reckless. And you've let it go unchecked for too long. The room vibrated with silence, every breath heavy. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a cold, deliberate edge. If you want to treat this like a game, Quillan, then we'll play by the law's rules, not family's excuses. His smirk faltered, just slightly, but it was enough. Mother's eyes darted between us, fear blooming there. Father exhaled slowly, his hand pressing against the table as if to steady himself. You wouldn't dare, Quillan hissed. I met his glare. The line has been drawn, and this time, I'm not the one on the wrong side of it. The tension was a blade hanging over the table, sharp and ready to fall. I gathered my papers, slid them back into the folder, and stood. In that moment, I knew we weren't just siblings anymore. We were opponents, and only one of us would walk away unscathed. When I walked back into my parents' home that Sunday evening, the tension was already sitting in the air, heavy and unspoken. The lights were on in every room, curtains pulled back, as though the house itself wanted to expose our shame. I didn't need to ask. I knew they had seen the news. As I set my bag down, I heard the television playing from the living room. Seattle man gifts luxury bracelet worth millions to girlfriend. Experts say the jewel may be part of a private collection. There it was, looping on the local station. Roxalana's live stream clipped into a neat segment, commentators speculating on the piece's authenticity. My parents were seated in silence. My father's face was flushed, his jaw locked, while my mother twisted a napkin in her hands until it tore. I stood in the doorway, not moving. The embarrassment wasn't just mine anymore. Neighbors had seen it, father's colleagues, mother's church friends. Everyone now knew our family name through the lens of my brother's arrogance. My humiliation had become our family's public shame. Father's voice cracked first. "What have you dragged this family into, Quillan?" Quillan leaned against the wall, arms folded, his voice dripping with arrogance. "It was a gift. They're exaggerating online. The press will spin anything for views." Mother tried to interject, her voice frail. "Maybe if we all stop feeding it, it will pass." "Zephyra, did you have to let it go so far? You know how these things spiral." I turned sharply. "Don't you dare put this on me. This time, you can't cover for him. The world already knows." Quillan laughed. "You always did love playing the victim. It's jewelry, Z, not the crown jewels." Father slammed his hand on the arm of the chair. "Enough. This isn't just about jewelry anymore. This is about the family's name being dragged through the mud." I met his gaze, unflinching. When the truth is out, denial is just delay, and the truth is already out. The doorbell rang before anyone could respond. Moments later, Roxalana walked in, clutching a bag against her chest. Her face was pale, lips pressed tight, eyes darting between us. She cleared her throat. "I came to return some things." But when she shifted the bag, the glimmer of the bracelet peeked out. My eyes locked on it. "You brought it here to hand it back, I assume?" Roxalana tightened her grip. "He gave it to me. It's mine. You can't take what was never his to give." My voice was steady, colder than I'd ever heard it. Her chin lifted, defiance breaking through her nerves. "Do you know how humiliated I was when people called it fake? I deserve this. After everything, I deserve something real." I stepped forward, blocking her path toward the door. "You deserve honesty, Roxalana. But you won't find it in something stolen." She faltered, shifting her weight, torn between defiance and guilt. Behind me, Quillan barked, "If I gave it to her, it's hers." I turned on him. "You never owned it, Quillan. You stole it from me, from the company, from our family's name." The room erupted. Father's face burned crimson as he stood, pointing at Quillan. "You've disgraced us. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Mother's voice broke into sobs. "Please, both of you, stop this before it destroys us completely." But Quillan only grew louder, his voice shaking the walls. "I'm tired of this. Tired of you acting like you're better than me. You're not. You've never been. You're the youngest. You've never built anything on your own." His words struck deep, but instead of crumbling, I straightened, my voice cutting through the chaos. "You think I'm invisible? Not anymore." Papers scattered as I slammed the folder onto the table again, pointing to the appraisals, the certificates, the undeniable truth. "This bracelet isn't a symbol of your generosity. It's proof of your theft, and no amount of yelling will change that." Arguments overlapped. Father shouting, mother crying, Roxalana insisting she had a right to keep it, Quillan spewing accusations. The house had never been so loud, so raw. And then, in the heat of it all, the bracelet slipped from Roxalana's hands. It hit the hardwood with a sharp clink, ringing louder than the shouting had. The room fell silent, every eye locked on the sapphire as it spun once, twice, before coming to rest under the table's edge, gleaming like a witness none of us could silence. I moved slowly, kneeling, reaching out. My fingers curled around it, cool and solid in my palm. When I rose, no one spoke. I held it up, its light catching in the silence. My voice, low but unshaking, filled the room. This wasn't just about jewelry. It was about who we really were when the lies cracked open. Their faces told the truth. My father's fury, my mother's despair, my brother's faltering mask of arrogance. Roxalana turned away, shame painting her cheeks. The illusion was shattered, and my next move would decide whether the family could ever recover. Monday morning crept in like an unwelcome guest. I hadn't really slept, only drifted in and out with the bracelet lying on my desk as if it were watching me. The first thing I did was reach for my phone, and what I saw made my stomach churn. News alerts stacked on the screen like a tower ready to collapse. Seattle family scandal. $1 million bracelet gift gone wrong. Brother-sister feud over luxury heirloom. I sat at the edge of my bed, phone in one hand, bracelet glinting in the other. Mark Twain's words came to me without effort. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. And Quillan's lie was sprinting at full speed. It wasn't just gossip anymore. This was a headline. And with every headline came whispers, raised brows, and a spectacle that no longer belonged to me alone. The scandal had left my apartment, left our dining table, and spilled out into the city. I stared at the bracelet, cold in my palm, thinking how a single careless act had turned my life into a public drama. By the time I made coffee, the phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails, texts, missed calls. Clients who had trusted me with commissions wanted answers. Friends who barely checked in were suddenly curious. Even old colleagues from design school sent links to the coverage with notes like, "Is this true?" One message read, "I hope this isn't what it looks like. I've always trusted your work." Another was less kind. "If you're caught up in fakes, my gallery can't risk showcasing your pieces anymore." I felt the humiliation twist deeper. It wasn't enough that my brother had stolen from me. Now his arrogance was bleeding into my professional life. My reputation was my lifeblood, and it was being cracked like china. Reputation is like fine china. Once cracked, it never looks the same again. That thought sat heavy with me as I typed quick reassurances to business partners, attaching scans of valuations, insurance documents, proof of authenticity. Yet even as I hit send, I knew doubt spreads faster than reassurance. I closed my eyes and breathed through the suffocating pressure. The silence of my apartment was filled with the roar of other people's voices, people I'd never met, dissecting my worth as though they knew me. By mid-morning, Valencia called. Her voice was calm, but the weight in her words was unmistakable. "Zephyra, I've filed. This isn't family drama anymore. It's grand larceny." The words hit like a gavel. My brother was now officially facing charges. There was no pretending this was a sibling spat gone wrong. It was public record, a criminal case in motion. I sat down hard on the couch. "So there's no going back?" "There's no back," she said firmly. "Not after the live stream, the press coverage, the valuations." He didn't just cross a line, he shattered it, and now the law has to do its part. Even as I nodded, my phone lit up with another call, my mother's number. I almost ignored it, but my thumb betrayed me. Her voice was soft, trembling. "Z, please, don't let this go further. He's your brother. He made a mistake, but he doesn't deserve prison." I clenched my jaw. "Mom, he didn't make a mistake. He broke into my home, stole from me, and paraded it online. If anyone else had done that, you'd call it theft without hesitation." "But your family," she whispered. "Please, don't destroy him." I hung up without answering. My hands shook, not from doubt, but from the ache of being pulled between loyalty and justice. By afternoon, the local news cycle had shifted into overdrive. Cameras captured Quillan leaving his apartment, questions shouted at him as he kept his head down. Neighbors stood on balconies whispering. His co-workers, once proud to brag about his charm, now distanced themselves. Roxalana had already played her part. Reporters quoted her saying, "He promised me it was his. How was I supposed to know?" Throwing him under the bus as if betrayal were contagious. I watched the footage in silence, my phone vibrating every few seconds with new updates. The downfall was public, raw, and irreversible. Humiliation is the one punishment pride can never bear, I thought aloud, staring at the screen. And Quillan, for all his bravado, was drowning in it. Still, part of me knew humiliation wasn't enough. This wasn't about watching him squirm under the weight of public ridicule. This was about ensuring he never had the chance to strip me of my dignity again. By evening, I sat at my desk, the bracelet resting in my hand. The weight of it felt different now. not just as a piece of art, but as a symbol of the line that had been crossed. The phone rang again. This time, both parents, their voices together. Father's tone was stern, mother's pleading. "Don't let your brother's life be destroyed over this," father said. "Please, darling," mother added. "You've made your point. Don't let it go any further." I closed my eyes and whispered, "He destroyed it the moment he called my work cheap." The line went quiet, their voices swallowed by the space between us. I hung up, staring again at the bracelet, its sapphire catching the last of the daylight. Tomorrow, I would decide if blood was still thicker than justice. Tuesday morning, I walked into the precinct with the weight of the past week pressing on my shoulders. The sapphire bracelet felt heavier in my bag than it ever had around a wrist. I was here to finalize the reports, to make official what had already spiraled into public view. As I crossed the steps, I saw her, Roxolana, standing near the entrance with reporters gathered like vultures. She clutched her handbag tight, defiance plastered on her face. The moment our eyes met, she stepped forward. "He gave it to me," she said loudly enough for the cameras to catch. "It's mine." Gasps rippled through the small crowd. I stopped just short of her, planting my heels firmly against the stone. My voice cut sharp and clean. "You can't steal from a thief and call it a gift." The crowd leaned in closer, microphones pointed our way. Roxolana's chin lifted higher. "He promised it was his." "You don't get to rewrite what happened because you regret it now." I moved closer, voice low but clear. "What I regret is letting people like you believe lies can erase ownership. That bracelet never belonged to him. And deep down, you know it." Her jaw tightened. Behind us, cameras clicked in rapid fire. The public spectacle intensified, but I didn't waver. The pressure, if anything, sharpened me. Inside, officers escorted her toward a side room. "We'll take it from here," one said, guiding her along as she muttered about deserving it. Minutes later, Quillon appeared, wrists cuffed, flanked by two officers. His suit was wrinkled, hair unkempt, but he still held himself like arrogance could shield him. He glanced at me, lips twisting into something between a smirk and a sneer. "This is ridiculous," he barked at the officers. "You're making a spectacle out of nothing." Entitlement doesn't look so tall when it's standing behind bars, I thought, though I didn't say it aloud. And Valencia met me in the lobby, calm and collected, her binder in hand. "The case is strong," she said, her voice quiet but confident. "We have documentation, valuation, eyewitness accounts, and now video evidence. He can try to bluff, but the law is not swayed by bravado." For the first time, relief mingled with grief. This was my brother. The boy I'd once defended on playgrounds. Now, he was the man being escorted past me in cuffs. "Justice is slow," Valencia added, "but it's sure." I nodded, though my throat burned. The conference room they placed us in was sterile, too bright, too quiet. Valencia spread the documents across the table like a dealer laying down cards. My parents sat stiffly across from me, Sibylla dabbing her eyes with a tissue, Theron avoiding my gaze. Quillon slouched in a chair, the cuffs removed, but his arrogance intact. Valencia's tone was matter-of-fact. "Quillon faces up to 3 years in prison. Unless, Saphira, you're open to mediation." All eyes shifted to me. The silence pressed like a weight. I took a slow breath and leaned forward. "You want mediation? Fine. Here it is." I locked eyes with my brother. "You work under me for 6 months. Minimum wage. Every day you clock in. Every day you learn what real value means. Or you serve time." The room cracked with shock. My parents gaped, words caught in their throats. Roxolana sat in the corner, fury in her eyes, but silent now. And Quillon, his face drained of color before the anger rushed back in. "You can't be serious," he spat. I didn't blink. Dead serious. His chair scraped loudly as he pushed back, fists clenched. "You can't do this to me." "The law can," I replied evenly. "I'm giving you mercy. Don't mistake it for weakness." Mother leaned forward, voice breaking. "Zafira, please, he's your brother. Don't humiliate him further." Father added, "Think about the family name, the future." Prison will ruin him. I turned toward them both. He ruined himself the moment he walked into my home uninvited and treated my life's work like a party favor. This is the only way forward. The air crackled with tension, guilt pressing against righteousness inside me, but I didn't flinch. I had given too many years to silence. By afternoon, the news broke. Headlines screamed about the ultimatum. Online, reactions poured in. Some praised me. Finally, a woman who won't let her brother walk over her. Others ridiculed Quilon, mocking him for being forced into minimum wage labor. The evening wore thin as fatigue settled into my bones. My phone buzzed again. Valencia's voice came steady over the line. He's agreed to your terms, Zephira. He'll start next week. I let the silence stretch before answering. Fine. At home later, the apartment felt too still, the bracelet gleaming softly where it sat on my desk. The day replayed in fragments, the cameras, Roxalana's shrill protests, my parents' pleas, Quilon's disbelief, and finally his muttered words when the officers pressed him for an answer. Fine, I'll do it. But the way he said it, dripping with bitterness, told me everything. Compliance wasn't acceptance, it was survival. I closed my eyes, whispering into the silence. He thought he'd broken me, but now he will learn what it means to build from nothing. The power was mine again, but I knew the test of family bonds had only just begun. Wednesday evening settled into my apartment like an unwanted shadow. The bracelet lay on the table before me, catching the dim light of the lamp, a reminder of everything that had unraveled. My phone lit up every few minutes with the same names, the same numbers, my parents, alternating between calls and voicemails. I let it buzz until the sound dulled into the background hum. Silence pressed harder than noise ever could. It wasn't just the quiet of my home. It was the silence of family that once prided itself on loyalty. Sometimes the loudest answer a family can give is silence, I whispered, staring at the bracelet. My brother hadn't called. He hadn't even tried to apologize. The stillness wasn't peace, it was avoidance, and I could feel it echoing through me. I folded my arms, letting the weight of that silence sit. The storm was no longer about headlines or social media. It was about whether I would keep letting my family's denial bury me or finally dig myself free. The phone rang again. This time I answered. Zephira. My father's voice came first, gruff but pleading. This has gone far enough. He's your brother. Blood is blood. My mother's voice slipped in, thick with tears. Please, darling, don't let this destroy him. Families survive mistakes. I held the phone tighter, every muscle braced. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal. Z, father said firmly, think about what you're doing. Prison, minimum wage humiliation. He's family. He'll never forgive you if you push this. My breath slowed, steadied. And I'll never forgive myself if I let him keep trampling over me. Do you know what it feels like to spend your life being invisible to your own family? He didn't just take jewelry. He took the truth of who I am, and he mocked it. Families forgive, my mother insisted. Families protect, I countered. Blood makes you related, but loyalty makes you family. And I've had neither from him for years. The silence that followed was jagged, like glass between us. When the call ended, I sat still, staring at the phone in my hand. The guilt pressed hard, heavier than I wanted to admit. Memories flashed, holiday dinners, laughter that once filled these walls, the rare moments Quilon and I had worked together as children on some silly project. Now, those echoes had been replaced with courtroom whispers and media clips. I set the phone down and leaned back, forcing myself to breathe. This isn't revenge, I said aloud, though no one was there to hear it. This is accountability. Eleanor Roosevelt's words surfaced like a balm. Justice cannot be for one side alone, but must be for both. I repeated them slowly, reminding myself why I had to stand firm. Yes, Quilon's suffering would stain our family name. Yes, people would whisper at my parents in grocery stores, in church pews, in their circles, but the stain wasn't mine. It was his. And justice wasn't optional. It was overdue. By nightfall, the family group chat was silent. Normally, it would be buzzing with casual updates, photos of meals, endless chains of jokes. Tonight, nothing. Relatives who had called incessantly the week before now disappeared. No supportive texts, no words of encouragement. It wasn't just silence from Quillon, it was silence from everyone. I scrolled through the thread, the blankness pressing into me like a verdict. "When you stand for yourself," I whispered, "sometimes you stand alone." That silence became its own kind of confirmation. They would not back me, not openly. Perhaps they agreed privately, but cowardice kept them muted. Or perhaps they chose him, as they always had. Either way, I was left in the stillness, knowing that righteousness rarely comes with applause. Loneliness sharpened in me, but so did resolve. For the first time, their silence didn't shrink me. It reminded me that I was finally standing. I picked up the bracelet, feeling its cool weight against my palm. The sapphire gleamed, steady and unyielding. "They may never forgive me," I whispered into the quiet. "But I've finally forgiven myself for staying silent too long." I closed my eyes, pressing the bracelet against my chest. Justice over blood. Dignity over forced loyalty. For once, I chose myself. Not as a sister clinging to family ties, but as a woman unwilling to bend to betrayal anymore. Tomorrow, the world would hear my voice, not as a sister, not as the overlooked child, but as the rightful owner of my life. Thursday evening, I pulled into the driveway of my parents' house. The windows glowed, and through them I saw the silhouettes of people gathered. Tonight had been framed as a reconciliation, but I knew better. This wasn't going to be peace, it was going to be theater. When I stepped inside, the smell of roast beef and perfume hit me. Relatives filled the dining room, faces lined with judgment and curiosity. My parents sat at the head of the long table, Theron with his arms folded, Sibylla twisting her napkin like a lifeline. Quillon was already seated, leaning back with a look of irritation masked as indifference. Families don't just air dirty laundry, I thought to myself. They hang it in the front yard when they think you've stepped out of line. I smoothed my jacket, folder in hand, and took my seat. My heart pounded, but my voice was ready. Tonight, I wasn't here to ask for recognition. I was here to deliver truth. Quillon broke the silence first. "I only wanted to impress someone, that's all. I didn't think it mattered." He looked around the table, scanning faces for sympathy. "I was trying to do something nice, and suddenly I'm treated like a criminal. Is that fair?" A few cousins nodded faintly, unwilling to challenge him outright. An uncle coughed into his hand. His performance was working. He painted himself as misunderstood, unlucky, a victim of circumstance. "I never meant to hurt anyone," Quillon added, his voice carrying a false sincerity. "I just thought it was something she could wear for one night. I didn't realize it would spiral into this." I felt the familiar pull of frustration, that dangerous urge to let him keep spinning the story. But then I reminded myself, silence would mean erasure. If you let someone else tell your story, I thought, don't be surprised when they make you the villain. I stood, calm but firm, placing the folder on the table. The chatter stilled. One by one, I laid out the evidence: insurance papers, valuations, screenshots, news reports. "This isn't speculation," I said, locking eyes with my brother. "This isn't exaggeration. This is documented fact." Quillon rolled his eyes, but I pressed on. "Next time you call something cheap, make sure you know its worth." The room froze. A murmur passed through the relatives seated on either side. Eyes darted between the papers and my face, whispers rising, then silence again. In that moment, I felt the weight shift. The humiliation he had tried to pin on me turned into my authority. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't falter. For once, the spotlight was exactly where it needed to be. I turned from my brother to the room at large. My voice carried steady, deliberate. "For years, you thought I was invisible. You looked past me at dinners, skimmed over my accomplishments, handed out praise like it was currency, but never to me. Tonight, that ends. I am the one holding this family's legacy." Some relatives shifted uncomfortably. My mother whispered, "Zephira, please." But I continued. Loyalty is not protecting someone's worst behavior. Loyalty is standing for the truth, even when it hurts. Protecting bad behavior destroys trust more than confronting it ever could. I let my gaze sweep the room, lingering on each face. David Hurley once said, "The standard you walk past is the standard you accept." And for too long, this family has walked past Quillan's arrogance. Tonight, I refuse to accept it. The words settled heavy in the air. Painful, yes, but liberating too. My voice had never been so steady, so unapologetic. The silence stretched. My parents said nothing, their eyes cast downward. The relatives who had once gossiped so easily now avoided my gaze, and Quillan, his face was pale, his jaw clenched, no words left to twist. I picked up the bracelet from where it rested in its velvet box, holding it for the last time before snapping it closed. The sound echoed in the room like a gavel. "I didn't win because you applauded me," I said finally. "I won because I finally stopped needing you to." I tucked the box under my arm, turned, and walked toward the door. Behind me, no one moved. No applause, no reconciliation. Only the stunned silence of people who realized the ground beneath them had shifted. And as I stepped out into the night, I knew this wasn't about family approval anymore. It was about justice, about dignity, about finally choosing myself.